200SX S12 by Nissan. The S12, yes, an S12, it's pretty much the unicorn, especially here in the United States. There is the S10, but the S12 is, and I quote by Ryan, the one people actually cared about when it came out. It kind of served as a good blueprint for the 240 and S chassis platform. So this eventually went to the S13. So what they took from this, they learned from this, and then brought it to the S13. And then once the S13 came out, it just kind of a forgotten soul. And then everybody said, is that a Corolla? No, it's not an 86, but it does kind of look like one. Does it have the charm of a Corolla and a 240 combined? Yeah, it kind of does. The motor in this is a CA, not a KA, a CA20. And what that means is you have a whopping, basically 90 wheel horsepower, if that. You have about 100 foot-pounds of torque as well, but this is one of those cars you don't care. You just don't care. It is super, super charming. Like, it has so much charm. You just kind of cruise around town and you're like, I have nothing to prove, because you feel like you're driving a piece of Japanese culture and history. And when I first saw this car at one of our local meets, I kind of assumed that it was one of our imported cars from Japanese Classics. If you might remember, I did an R32, which was right-hand drive. But then I saw that this was left-hand drive, and I was like, wait a minute. We have those in the States, and that alone tells you something, that it's pretty forgotten. I mean, you go around the corner, and then you go to the straight, and you go. It can do it. You can do it. You can do it. Okay. So basically, what Ryan did with this car was kind of Frankenstein a few things, because parts aren't really available for this thing. You kind of have to come up with better solutions. The front shocks on this car are from an MR2, and the rear shocks in this car are from a Fox Body Mustang. I bet you didn't see that coming. So when I first learned about that, I was super intrigued. So what I want to also talk about is this car feels, for being a 1986, it feels way ahead of its time. It has power everything, and number one thing that I noticed, it has a digital dash. So you have a digital speedo, digital gas gauge. It was an option in the S13 as well, but nobody paid for it. It was way too much money. But when I first sat down in this and you turned the key, and I was like, whoa. It kind of feels like almost the S2000, except way older. You have the classic 80s green color, which screams, I hope that there's not a wiring problem, but at the same time, you love it that much. Occasionally, the speedo will go in and out, but all you have to do is hit the dash and it works again. The steering wheel in this too is a Momo, and this is also from the 80s, but the steering wheel originally in this car is like a two-spoke kind of deal, and it's kind of awkward, especially if you just kind of want to lay around with your arm on the window or just kind of cruise around. So this is way more comfortable to kind of drive around in. When it comes to the brakes and everything else, it's perfectly balanced for the horsepower that you're making. That's probably a good way to put it. Also, this is an automatic, and it had a stick shift option from the factory as well, but the previous owner picked the automatic, and that's okay, because we're here to enjoy the legend of the S12, and it's still just as fun to drive. And when you go around, you know, corners, you go around bends, it's pretty planted, I must say. I'm pretty impressed. Also, the wheels on this thing are awesome. They're like this classic kind of Inkeys. So they came back with this wheel, they remanufacture it because of demand. And usually I'm not a fan of like kind of the 4-spoke cross kind of deal, but I love it. It fits the character of this car. What's even funnier is if you look back at the S10, it's even boxier than this was. The 80s was like the era of let's box all the things. Everything was boxy, but the Japanese cars especially though, I think they really pulled it off. You had the Honda Prelude, you had the S12, you had the Corolla 886. What's not to like? So basically what this car has suspension wise, it has sway bars, end links, and it has SSC springs on it. Now, it's pretty much the only spring that's made for this car. So if you wanted to get like coilovers or anything like that, you would have to basically fabricate it and go from the S13 and backtrack, essentially. A complete Frankenstein, like I said, and there is zero body roll. It's super planted in the front. So it adds to a very lovely stroll through the woods, if you know what I mean. You're just cruising along and you barely have to put input and the car turns. The only coilover on the market for this car is Megan Racing, but those are, you know, $1,000, which, you know, coilovers are expensive. But it's essentially, you take the ones from the S13 and you take apart the real ones and you make it work, essentially. It's more of a spring and shock setup for the back. That alone tells you how much different the S12 underneath compared to the S13 is. And the car is aged pretty well. I mean, the interior doesn't feel horrible. The seats they're nice, comfy, soft cloth seats. It's very stereotypical kind of 90s kind of feeling. And the back seat, it's not usable. I'm just gonna tell you. The only main problem this car has had is kind of electrical. By electrical, I mean battery stuff. Apparently, when he first got the car, if you left it off basically for 24 hours, it wouldn't start. And then he was like, well, maybe it's the alternator. So he replaced the alternator and bam, it worked like a champ. He had gone through 5 batteries before figuring this out. So he's put some love into this thing. The exhaust as well is a modified S13 exhaust made basically to fit this car. Now the exhaust note on it is kind of subtle. You know, it's like, this is so hard to explain. When you drive a car like this, it's like take an American kind of classic car, then kind of tone it down, but you still get that kind of raspy kind of sound, the old school sound, and just cruise. If you just drive and cruise and have a good time, it's classic, but in a very different way. And knowing that with the history of this car, that people had the guts to really just start sliding these things down mountains is really saying something. Nowadays, with any of these kind of Japanese classics that we're starting to be able to import, not that this one was imported, but same kind of vibe, you know, it feels like it was imported. It's a car that we rarely ever see and we cherish it. What's great though about this motor, even though they really kind of ignored the rest of the motor, Nissan used the development of the heads on this car to work on the RB, and now we know about the RB because of the Skylines. So you can thank the CA for helping create the monster that is the RB, any of the RBs. I feel like it has that Miata / BRZ syndrome that's really old as well. You know, you can use all the power at any time and it's fun. And I really believe that's because of the handling that Ryan did to this car. If this thing was body rolling all over the place, I would have been like, it's cool. It's a cool car to have, but man, like, let's pray before we go around that corner. One of the options that's really forgettable, but really awesome, is it has rain sensing wipers. In 1986, a lot of cars nowadays don't even have that. But basically, if it rains, it starts wiping. I mean, that's insane. That's really cool. And last but not least, the car has flip-up headlights. So, with that, I want to thank each and every one of you for watching this quick little review video. And I also want to thank Ryan for letting me drive his beautiful Nissan S12, also known as the 200SX. So I will see you guys next time, and take it easy. Have a fantastic day.